Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 18 of the VonDubCast. Very special guest today, Alex Mckendry. We met a couple, probably about a year ago now. Just kind of came into the office for something for work, and we got bullshit, and we had a really good conversation for probably an hour. Obviously, all about work things, and then next time he came in, we're just finalizing a deal or whatever we're doing. He noticed some hockey pictures, and he just said, "Oh, you like hockey?" And just kind of, had to squeeze it out of him. But he's a pretty humble guy. But he told me a couple cool stories, and just real down to earth, salt of the earth kind of guy, and really enjoy talking to him. Every time we get on the phone, it's always a good bullshit session. There's always a couple good stories going either way, and a lot of good laughs. So I was really happy when he agreed to come over and do this interview with me in person. And that was the other side of this was I'd always really wanted to do in person interviews, but once I started this process, and it was so scary and so much work and so much effort, and the online ones are so much less effort, and it works, and you put yourself out there less. You can be very flexible. If something changes on that day, you can push it an hour and switch to the next day, or do it a little bit early, whatever works for them, and really allows you to go on the guest schedule. Or when you bring somebody in person, it's it's a set time. They're coming. It takes a lot out of their day for them to come and meet with you in person, but the conversation level is so much better, guys. Oh my goodness, without that small leg and being able to pass the conversation back and forth a couple of times throughout a subject, instead of just letting one person say their 10-minute piece and then kind of trying to remember all the points that brought up in your own head and reflect them back after, which is what a lot of the online interviews turn into, as much as you try to prevent it. So I really regret maybe not jumping into these in-person interviews as soon as maybe I should have. And I think if you go back to the interview that I did with Sean a couple weeks back, I'd definitely been talking about it on that podcast, and I had said something like, "Oh yeah, I just I'm doing this, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to do that." And he kind of stopped me and said, "That is a good way to think, but also you got to be really careful every time you talk about being ready, because you're never ready." And a lot of times you'll use that excuse of when I'm ready to really hold yourself back from that. And he kind of called me on it right in the moment. It really stuck with me in the next couple of days. I think I was really being a chicken about figuring out what my next in-person podcast would be, because I knew that'd be a big step to take, and I knew I had to do it. And I had reached out to Alex a couple times, and I definitely could have followed up with him earlier, but I would put it off because I knew I was worried, and I knew that he was such a nice guy, he'd probably jump right to it. And like he did, when I asked him, he was all for it, and just whatever he could do to help. Just the type of guy he is. You'll hear it on the interview. He's just, can't say enough about him. Just awesome. So leading up to the day we recorded this, I was just getting more and more nervous. My stomach felt sick, and holy man, all that stuff. But as soon as we started recording, I knew it was the right decision, and I knew that this in-person interview style is something I need to make sure I hold myself to, and make sure I'm getting at least one or two done a month that are in person, because it does take it quite far. And I've ordered a couple cool things to add to that experience and make the in-person interviews more professional in that. So I'm excited to roll that out to you guys over the next couple months as well. And really enjoyed this conversation. We talk a lot about hockey. The majority of the podcast is about hockey and just what hockey teaches you, and the life lessons that come around it, kind of from shavers to the show, top to bottom, and kind of a little bit about the environment around minor hockey and the push to be a professional in all sports, but just predominantly hockey, because that's where both of our expertise, if you had to pick a sport, would be in hockey. So really enjoyed it. It was really fun to talk about some of those things and go put myself back into the shoes you were in, or the skates you were in, I guess it would be when you're a kid and you're learning the sport that you love so much and is such a part of the country and the environment, especially growing up in a small town where hockey is the number one thing. It really pushes it to that next level. So it's kind of fun to fall back into that. Haven't had a good in-depth hockey conversation like that in a long time, and I hope this is the first of many, and I can keep having people on that love the game just as much as I do. And I hope when people hear this interview and that sort of thing, that's kind of there's so many of these different topics that I really would love to talk about, but people almost don't even know I like, I mean, hockey's a bad example maybe, but there's so many things like AI that I have such a huge passion for, and people don't even know it, that I'm just excited to get people on that I can start these conversations with and open that door to let people know that those conversations are here to be had if they want to come have them. So yeah, really nice to get a hockey podcast on the books, and hopefully, like I said, it's the start of a few more, because I could talk hockey all day with anybody. It doesn't even matter. But then you add on to that someone that has something to say and a point of view that might add something to people that have been, just seeing it from a fan perspective or just seeing it from some other perspective, and it really is nice to get a really well-rounded view of them. Yeah, and like these intros, I've been trying to put any podcasts that I really go in depth about on the podcast, talk about it in the intro, and kind of let people know when to find them. And the one for this podcast, you'll hear it. I mean, you guys can probably get a beer going and take a drink every time we say Spit and Chicklets, because it definitely comes up quite a lot, and just the impact that such a cool, transformative sports podcast, I mean, definitely hockey, but I think all of sports is really taking notice of what they've done. And yeah, I just want to shout out those guys. They've really were a big part of, showing me more avenues that really nailed down that I wanted to pursue this as something I wanted to try, was the Spit and Chicklets podcast and what those guys are doing over there. So yeah, I just wanted to maybe make them the featured podcast of the day. And if this is the first podcast you ever listen to, and you're curious about the format and hockey, something you really like, you can't go wrong with Spit and Chicklets. They do a pretty bang up job there, and it's always a lot of laughs and some really good interviews. And like you'll hear on this podcast with Alex, I learned so much from that podcast. And just you watch any sport from the position of a fan, and you don't have the full understanding of all the ins and outs that go on with them, and just you're never going to get that fully immersed point of view that these guys that are actually living it day in and day out are going to get. But you can get so much closer, and just the amount of enjoyment you can get out of hockey, or I think this with any sport. I think the last 10% of understanding of a sport is where the real enjoyment comes out of. I think when you first understand a game, it gives you that, just the edge to watch it and understand it. And that is a big jump forward, a big step forward in someone, coming into a sport. And then there's that next step you can take where you really know all the rules in and out, and you kind of taken it as far as you can from a fan perspective of what you would know and the positions you can take. And then I think that next step further is those, either getting in with a super fan or trying to get it right from the horse's mouth, from the professionals, from the people involved in the highest levels. And that goes for all sports and all topics even, but it's just so cool to be able to see that. And then hopefully I can get in touch with more guys that have unique outlooks on stuff like this, and bring that to you guys in a hopefully entertaining fashion. I think I don't know, I can't imagine this won't be entertaining, just because of how big my smile was going ear to ear after we finished this podcast. I was just bouncing around the house. I was so happy with it, and that's the fun part of this that you guys don't get to see. It's so much work and so much nerves and everything that goes into getting these set up, and then you do them, and then you walk out of them, and you're on cloud nine, bouncing around the house, and just living the vida loca. So yeah, thanks guys for tuning in. I really hope you like this episode. If you could do me a favor and follow the VonDubCast Twitter and Instagram pages. Like I say every time, not a big social media guy. I think it's actually pretty harmful to people, but it's important for growing this podcast. And you just do me the favor. I'm trying to keep it entertaining, keep it as positive and full of love and compassion, like I always say, the entire way. So yeah, thanks, and I'll see you at the end of the episode. All right, welcome everybody. Episode 18 of the VonDubCast. Very special episode. I got my first live guest since the very start. I got Alex Mckendry with me. Thanks for being here, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So just wanted to, come and talk some sports. I know the first time we met, we were just through work, and we just ended up bullshitting for probably an hour. And then the next time you came in, you dropped kind of a bombshell on me that you used to play hockey, and I'm a big diehard NHL guy, and I had no idea. And then we got really talking. We had some fun there. So I just wanted to start where'd you grow up, Alex?
Well, I grew up in Ontario. I was born in Midland and raised in Barrie, Ontario. Yeah. And that's where I played all my minor hockey with Barrie Minor Hockey and the Knights of Columbus Hockey. Yeah. And then from there, I went over to junior up north to Sudbury, Ontario, and played for the Sudbury Wolves for 3 years.
Oh, wow. And did you always, were you dreaming of playing the NHL, or did that kind of come as a surprise?
I think it just came as a surprise. I mean, I think every kid goes out there and, playing on the street, you play in the park, you do whatever, and then just develop that you got a little bit better every year. And then as I got into my midget year, people took notice, and then that's how you got into the major junior A. So going up to Sudbury, was drafted out of midget. I was a 3rd-round pick in midget, but that's okay. Sudbury was rebuilding and made the team. So
that's awesome.
It was good.
It's funny to hear listening to Spittin' Chicklets, that hockey podcast there. It's just awesome to listen to. But something I really notice is there's a generational gap. It seems like guys of a certain age, it seemed like they never really thought of playing in the NHL. And then I heard a certain age where these guys, it was always their dream growing up. And it seemed like it became more of a like an actual pathway to becoming something, whereas it almost seemed like people would just, I'm good enough to play in the NHL, really? And they were almost surprised by it. And it's funny, I wonder what year that changed.
Well, that's a good question when it changed. But I mean, I know as me growing up as a young man in Barrie and then going to play junior, your goal was to go play major junior A.
Right.
It wasn't to play tier 2 junior A. It wasn't to play junior B. You wanted to play major junior A. And so playing in the Ontario Hockey League, as one year goes by, you're a rookie. Second year, the older players are leaving. Now you become older. Now you're becoming a leader on the team. You're getting more experience. Your play's improving. That's when you start to realize that there's a potential that you could play in the NHL. And then people also take notice of that. And then as we were developing as a team and as a group of young men back then, agents start coming knocking on your door because they see potential. They hear what the Central Scouting is doing and all that. And then, that's where okay, well, what am I going to do here? Am I going to continue playing junior A and then I'm done? Or am I going to concentrate on playing major junior A, developing my skills, and getting drafted? And that's what I did.
Yeah, and so that was a conscious choice. You made the decision. So how old were you, do you think, when you made that choice that was something you're going to try and do, is make the show and make hockey?
17, 18 years old. Yeah, because I played junior at 16 in Sudbury. So that's, when you get to that level of major junior A, there's only one direction to go. Yeah. And that is to get to the show.
That's awesome.
You may not think of that when you're there as a 16-year-old because you're looking at these 17, 18, 19-year-olds and then an overage guy. You wonder if you're going to get there, and then as your skills develop, people start looking, and then you have that opportunity.
And do you think those years playing major junior were the funner years, or do you think the later years are funner? When do you have more fun in that?
I got to be honest with you, Nick. I mean, the best 3 years of my life was in Sudbury.
Yeah?
We were treated like kings there.
That's awesome.
The people in Sudbury was a not redneck, but it was it was a white collared town. Everybody worked in the mines. There was X amount of different areas where the mines were. And I mean, people just love us coming to the rink, playing hard, playing a little feisty, a little rough, and they loved it. They packed the building. And subsequently, through the years, our first year, we maybe not so good. Second year, we were much better. And then our third year, when we all got into our, final years of our junior A career, I mean, we were probably one of the strongest team in the Ontario Hockey League at the time in '76. So we didn't go to the Memorial Cup. We got beat out by the Finn Cups, but we had one hell of a hockey team. There was a lot of guys that I played with that were all drafted into the NHL.
Oh, really? So it wasn't just you going there?
Oh no, there was 6 of us. There was probably in my last year of junior, probably 5 or 6 of us in the first 2 rounds.
Holy wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we had quite a few guys go, and then the year after we were all gone. Ron Duguay naturally would have been a year younger than me because it was Ron Duguay, myself, and Hector Marini played in the same line pretty much for 3 years.
Wow, and that's when you get to develop that chemistry. When you get a couple of years, where you only usually see that once you get to the show, when you have that time, because usually in the minor hockey days, right, you're moving teams or you're aging out, and you don't have those core guys you can grow with. So that's awesome that you got that experience.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, you don't see that when you're in midget and that. You got kids that make the team, don't make the team. Maybe you played with them in bantam, but they don't make the midget side.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. But when you're in Sudbury, it's more structured, or in major junior hockey, it's more structured.
Yeah.
The coaching is far better. I mean, we had some good coaches. My last year, we had Jerry Topazzini, who played in the NHL for I don't know how many years with the Boston Bruins and that.
Wow.
So, we had some good coaching, and we had good mentors that came to the rink of players like Jimmy Papman, who was from Sudbury area, played for the Chicago Blackhawks. These guys would come whenever they were off time in the NHL season. They would come back home. They'd come and practice with us. So you could also see what it took to get to where you have to go if you want to get to that end of the yardstick. And I think junior is a very good measuring stick for any player. Yeah. Have those times changed? 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're back to your original question. I mean, when do you see, the people, when do you see kids or players know that they want to go into play in the NHL?
Yeah.
When you look at today's people or kids today, their parents push them so hard. Is it the player that wants to be in the NHL, or the kid that wants to make the NHL, or is it the parent that wants the kid to be in the NHL? So eventually, through time, either that kid is going to grow tired of being pushed and say, whoa, or he's going to develop his skills and he's going to be able to climb that ladder.
Yes.
But if you don't have that in your heart, or you're tired, whatever that case might be, you're not going to get to the top of the ladder.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple.
And I think that's a big change, either whether it's the kid that wants to make the show or if it's the parents. And I think you see that a lot. What I said, listening to Spittin' Chicklets, where it seemed like there was a distinct change when it went from playing in the NHL was kind of something you almost stumbled into a little bit more than starting from 4 years old. That's your goal and that's what your parents are working towards. But also another interesting thing I heard is it seemed like there was also a certain age where players were really struggling coming out of the league. And I don't know if that's just something where you just start to hear about it now with more people being more open about it. But these guys that play a long career in the NHL and then really struggle with finding identity once they leave it. And I wonder if that's part of being pressured from such a young age that you never know anything else in your whole life. When you decide at 17 or 18 that this is something you're going to pursue as an adult, as a choice you make, or that's a choice that's kind of always been given to you since 4 years old and there wasn't really any more options out of that. I wonder how much that impacts these guys that do struggle, and also just shows that you need to really invest in these guys and make sure they have ways out of the NHL that are in a healthy
environment when they're done. Yeah, and you know what? Back to that's a very good point, because everybody talks about what you did, how you did, but nobody asks you after the game what's there.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the game, and I only played X amount of games in the NHL.
Yeah.
But even in the minors, and when you're playing in that above level minor, the AHL, the Central Hockey League, when I was playing, you have a camaraderie with the guys. That's your family for the 6 months that you're there. And whenever all that ends, whether it be in the minors or the NHL, it is one. It's a blow to your ego because you're done, and maybe you didn't have a choice of how your career ended.
Yeah.
Or if you make the conscious decision that, listen, enough's enough, and that's exactly what Alex Mckendry had to do.
Yeah.
And I'll be very frank about that, because when I had the opportunity to go back and play, I had to consider my family and how much are you going to make when you go back?
Right.
So you could go back and play in the American League. You're not going to play in the NHL. You might make $30,000-$40,000 back then. Well, I had an opportunity to work with my brother, get a job at the mine, and make that kind of money and be home every night.
Right.
So my decision was enough's enough at 26. There's no sense going beating your brains out in the minors.
Yeah.
You're not going to play in the NHL. It's time that you got on with life. And then the light goes on. Now you have to get on in the real world. And one thing that Nick, that a lot of people maybe not or don't know is a lot of players back when I played in the day, when you wanted to get to that next step, whether it be the NHL, get there, you give up on education.
Yeah.
And that's because to travel, I mean, the Western Canada boys, from what I hear, had it worse than anybody. You're getting on a bus, you're on, we called it the iron lung. I mean, you're traveling for great distances to play a game, and you got to travel throughout the West. Ontario was no different. We played in Sudbury. To get to Toronto was 5 hours, 6 hours, depending on weather. Well, after a game, well, guess what? You had that travel back. So you're not home 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, do you really think you're going to get up at 7:30, 8 o'clock to go to school? I don't think so.
Not at
So
all.
school became secondary. So then what happens when you're done? You don't have the education to compete in the real world. Players that through my 7 years in the minors and playing a little bit in the NHL, you see the players coming to training camp out of universities, and they have great hockey programs. Most of them are in the States. We have some in Canada. I couldn't tell you all of them.
Right.
But for the players that went to university or to colleges in the States, when they got older and more mature, they got into, they got picked up by an NHL team or drafted by an NHL team.
Right.
Then, they had that opportunity. They had the education. Now, if they didn't make it in the NHL, whenever they were done, they could fall back on their education.
Yeah.
But for guys who didn't get the education, well, you know what? You had to start at the bottom. So dear old Alex here, he started at the bottom. I was a laborer at the mine at Quintet, stemming blast holes.
Yeah.
And then you work your way through as you develop, no different than hockey. As you improve at hockey, you climb the ladder. When you improve at work and you prove yourself, you climb the ladder. So you got to start.
Exactly. And that's definitely a huge point, Alex, is that how you can leverage your hockey career with an education and how different the two situations can be when you leave. But I think even whether you have an education or not, I think you nailed it already, saying it's the amount of camaraderie and the fun, and that's what everybody talks about, and that's the real struggles they're talking about, is they have this, this family that you go to war with every night, and it's so much fun on the bus, right? If you've played any kind of team sports that you had to travel, the kind of fun that you can have right on those bus rides. Sometimes they're 6 hours, but you have some of the funnest times of your life on those. And then to go back to almost civilian life, right? Most people have that realization when they turn 18, maybe 22. You might finish your sports career. For the majority of people, if you want to take it further, you're obviously on the the top percentage of a percentage, but then you have that happen at 35 or 40, where not only did it wasn't just your kid years, and then you hop into the real world, hopping into that adult world at the age of 35, even 26. That's not easy, and you can see that mirrored with some kids these days, even coming out of university at 26, 27 if they took an after degree. Some people, you take a master's and you finish at 30, and you come out in the real world and you realize it's a little bit different than it is. But then you just magnify that by 10 times with the kind of highs you feel playing in the NHL or any kind of sport. And I'm curious, as this becomes more of a vocal issue with things like Spittin' Chicklets, where guys are willing to come out and talk about these kind of issues that they're feeling, I wonder if the NHL is going to have to start putting programs in place to start, helping guys in that transition, help them get set up with jobs that get them just as excited, put them in positions where they can still feel a little bit of that fire that they depended on for so long, and not be such a stark transition of just top of the world to I don't know who I am anymore. And it's just you hear story after story of it, and you just feel so bad for these guys. And until I started listening to Spittin' Chicklets, I didn't even realize that was an issue. I didn't know that these guys are struggling like that when they leave, because nobody really talked about it until that. It's just amazing to see.
Yeah, and I think Nick, some of that too is, you go back into the 70s and 80s, the players back then, money was not there for the players.
Right.
The Allen Eagleson, Shabakal, all that kind of stuff. But the players today, since let's even say the late 80s, early 90s, when the money started to grow and, players were a lot of players were getting paid a lot of money, but didn't know how to handle that money. And that's why it was important, or is important, that these players today or have a good agent that has their shit together, that know that you have a financial planner, and that when you do end your career, when you're done, you have that financial, you don't have to really worry about going into the working world, because you have that in the bank.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are players that don't make as much as some players, but I mean, you still invest in your money wisely. These players are going to be taken care of. The NHL, I think, has got some really good, the concussion protocol. They've got that, I think, handled well. I know a good buddy of mine here in town, Howie Walker. He went through the testing. He had symptoms, and he's slowly getting taken care of. So, and Howie's been out of the game as long as I have been. So there are things out there that a lot of people, like, the work 8 to 4 don't know anything about, because the NHL, unless you're deep in the roots of the NHL, none of us will ever know that.
Right.
The only people that can speak to that would be players that are currently playing or just left in the last X amount of years, that can answer these questions. But I think the NHL does their best to protect the players and get all that player safety out there. Right. But after the game ends, I think the players have got to really make sure that they're set, by taking care of what they're making presently.
Exactly. And I think a big piece of that for myself, but I think for a lot of people, the first time, because hockey, and I mean, all sports have this, but I think hockey's the biggest example of it. It's such a, it has so many unwritten rules in hockey, and hockey is so much about attitude and how you speak, that a lot of that comes through in the interviews and what you give out to the media, right? You never talk about yourself. It's always about the team, and very much it's always been a culture of playing down anything individualistic and bring everything back to the team, which is great for a team sport. And if you want to have success, you have to have that. But I think that turned into, for the last, and I'd say until the last maybe 5 or 6 years, you'd very rarely hear these kind of stories from the players. I think until Spit and Chicklets kind of kicked the door down to that and getting guys, into a comfortable enough spot where they can tell these stories and not be worried about the repercussions and see that people are really going for it. That was the first time so many of us, just casual people that only, quit hockey at 18, and that was our familiarity with it, to hear all these stories about these struggles that they go through. And I think that also mimics, you can only put so much blame on something like the NHL. If there's not a big, groundswell of support for these issues to get them solved, they're a business, and they're not going to go solving issues that aren't being brought to them. And I think that's what's so special about something like that, of hearing the voices of the players and just going to show what interesting people, because anybody that's played hockey know that hockey players are some of the most interesting and the best stories, and it's just this untapped, you could have a whole wing of Hollywood just make hockey stories, all the stories on the bus, right? If you know that better than anybody, but you never hear them. And now you're starting to, and we're only hearing probably the top 2 layers. I'm sure there's a couple more layers of stories we're not hearing.
There's a few layers you'll never hear.
Exactly. But even the ones that we do, it's cool to see these stories start to come out, and just the understanding. I found, as a fan of the game, by listening to that, my understanding of it from their perspective, because you can only understand the game of hockey so much from your perspective when it's being played on a different level. Watching NHL hockey, you almost have to hear NHL players talk about it in complete confidence of how they talk about the game. I used to think, I'd be blown away of, like, how can playoff hockey look so much different than regular season hockey? Like, why don't they just play like that all the time? And then to hear it actually from the horse's mouth about what that takes out of you just to play, one playoff series, let alone get to the cup final and, go all the way. Yeah. It's an amazing accomplishment, but you just see, as a fan, you just say, why don't these guys just do it all the time? Right? It's just like your body, you'd be, your whole team would be hurt by Christmas if you tried to play with that kind of intensity. But it's just those kind of realizations that you just don't get from the outside. And I find my enjoyment of the game has gone skyrocketing since I've found that. And it's so interesting to find, just one little piece makes you enjoy a game that you've loved your whole life just all that much better, right? It's cool.
Oh, definitely. And you talk about Spit and Chicklets. I mean, these are ex-players or current players that are telling real life stories.
Yeah.
But, the players that you don't hear about are the guys that maybe have not made it to the level that these guys are at. Yeah. And, the guys that are struggling the most are the players probably whenever they left the game, they weren't prepared financially or any of that kind of stuff. And you take a look, you take a look at how many players now have, unfortunately committed suicide. Yeah, I mean, you take a look at all that. I mean, you really have to wonder. And for anybody that watches hockey, the stories that you hear when Spitting Chicklets and what you see on TV and all that stuff, you'll never see what's behind the scenes. You'll never know what's being said in the dressing room, because what happens in the dressing room, what happens on the plane, what happens on the bus stays there.
Yeah.
You don't see all that. So there's a lot of things that people don't see. But let's say you could ask me a question, Nick, and I could answer that question, but people that might listen to this podcast might say, well, that's a load of crap, because they've never done what I've done, or they don't understand what I've done.
Exactly.
And that's the biggest thing right there, and it's no different than today with the virus. I mean, we're changing. Our world is changing.
Yeah.
Hockey, its world has been changing now for the last probably 8, 10, 12 years. I mean, you take a look at technology that's come into the game. You take a look at these players before you went to training camp to get in shape. These guys have to come to
training camp in shape. Yeah.
And because of the money they're making and all that. So players today are 12 months of the year. These guys are like robots.
Yeah.
They have dietitians, they have trainers, they have everything to make them better. And, when everything ends, like we're talking about, these players that come on spitting chicklets, that's a big blow to them.
Yeah.
That's all done.
For sure. But it's also very, very beautiful for me to listen to some of the guys that have gone through exactly what you just said, that really dark place that they got to when they left and they lost all that they had, and then come through the other side, right? They had to do some real soul searching and really find out who they are. But it's nice to hear that be out there for those players that are currently playing that are going to have to go through that in a couple of years or tomorrow, right? Like you said, it's not always a choice, right? You could blow a knee out and be done tomorrow, right?
You're done tomorrow, exactly.
And to have a couple stories of really high level players that had great careers that have nothing to hang their head about, struggle with that as well, and come out the other side of it, I think that's very powerful for current players and young kids coming up, that if that's your dream to play in the show and you're doing everything you can, understand that and start preparing yourself for this. The earlier you can start to prepare for eventually leaving the game, right? I think that's going to start being a part of even these minor league, high-level elite schools that are teaching kids. I think that's going to be part of the curriculum to help walk them through that ending stage whenever it comes, right? And I think that's what people say. I think that's a big issue with it too, Alex, is that you think, oh, well, I'm not retiring. I'm going to keep playing for 6 years. So I'll start worrying, I'll worry about that in a couple of years. I'll start preparing in a couple of years. And then something happens and that just taken away from you. And now you've done no getting ready, whether it's financially or mentally. I think those are both two very, very crucial points. I remember watching that 30 for 30 they made on, I think it was more for football. It was called Broke, about all these players and just the financial woes that they get themselves in, right? You get your first check and you don't realize that half's going to taxes and you got the whole thing spent, and it's just story after story of this stuff. And I think it is getting better with the, most professional sports leagues have some sort of financial, it's a weekend course you have to take in your rookie year or something, but even that's better than nothing, right?
Yeah. And I think though, Nick, today, like the players are, for the most part, are better off than what they were 10 years ago.
Of course.
And then you take a look at whenever these players today are getting drafted, you look at the meetings they have to go to.
Yeah.
They're analyzed. You got people in there watching you, how you talk, how you act.
Yeah.
Well, that's all part of the process for them to understand that this is, one, it's a big business.
Yeah.
Secondary, it's the sport. And you have to be able to handle everything that's going to come at you. That's financial, the physical, the mental, all that stuff. And that's why I think players today are better off than players were 10, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think that is part of the package that you get when you get a good agent.
They bring all those things for you, make sure that you're preparing you for what you're about to undertake.
Could you imagine having Bobby Orr as your agent? The stuff that he went through with Alan Eagleson, from the Bruins to Chicago, and what he's doing today. The man is an agent, player agent. People are dying to use Bobby Orr, and there's a reason why. He knows the game, he understands it, and he also knows to go from that low point to the high point. Yeah. So it all depends what the player and the family of that player feel an agent can do for them.
Yeah, and that's what is also in the last couple of years, I think, like you say, probably in almost every categorical way you could look at it, players are better off than they were 10 years ago. But I think that is always matching itself too. So now these agents are having a new standard of, agents like Bobby Orr that can offer all that. If you want to compete in the agent domain, you got to be bringing as much of that as you can. You might not be able to bring everything Bobby Orr can, of course, right? Just without the experience. But now you have to pick that up in other areas, right? You have to make sure they're getting financial coaching. You got to be, you're seeing so many guys taking mental coaches and stuff just to help you on that side of the game, just coming into the league, like you say, so much more prepared. But that's why you're seeing the league get younger. You see these kids like Quinn Hughes come in and dominate the league right now, and it's like blowing your mind, because I used to always say, rule of thumb, you never know what you got out of a D-man until they're 26, 27, 28, right? That's when they're grown man. now you're watching these young kids come out. They look like they're in bantams and they're just walking guys doing spinoramas on the blue line. It's just amazing. But you would never have the confidence even to come in there, right? And I think if you try to do some of that high flying shit back in your day, you'd probably get clipped pretty quick and you'd be putting your spot pretty fast.
I don't recall any of that kind of stuff. But I'm just, I think also, Nick, like we talk about the NHL, we talk about the minors, we talk about ages. I think minor hockey also, this should be part of a minor hockey as you get into the bantam midget, knowing where you possibly want to go.
Right.
You're being watched by Central Scouting as a bantam or a midget to get to Major Junior A. I think that's all part of a minor hockey program too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be an everyday thing. That doesn't be something the coach does.
Yeah.
But it could be something minor hockey does. So parents and players at a young age can go and listen. These are the things that you've got to look for. These are the things you should be doing. And when agents come to talk to you, this is the stuff you should be talking to them about. And just see and develop your knowledge prior to getting there, and all of a sudden you're scrambling to get one.
100%. That is such a good idea, and I hope people listening take that. If you do have a kid in any sport that's going to, you have to be working. If that's a dream that you want to be ready for them, you can't expect a kid at 16, 17 to know those things. That is your job. You see all these parents just fighting to get them in there, and even pushing them when they don't want to. But if you really love your kid and you want them to be successful, you should be setting them up for all the life skills and the stuff, right? Because if you're going to pursue, if all goes well and you get drafted rated 18 and you make the show, first year, rookie year, for a fact your kid's going to miss out on some real life experience. They're going to gain, amazing life experience that you couldn't gain anywhere else. But they're not going to go to university if they're playing the show first year. They're not going to go, learn how to live on they're going to have to go through. You should be preparing, if that is a reasonable option with their talent level, you should be preparing them for that and starting to build those soft skills and those hard skills in these kids so that they're ready for that, because now that leaves them as a more functioning adult outside the realm of hockey, so that when you do, like we said, whether that's in 20 years or 20 days, when you do have to hang them up, you're more ready and you're more of a functioning adult, and you don't have to learn those hard lessons at that time. And I think that's a great idea for minor hockey to step in and take some of those roles too. And I think as much as you can take it out of the parents' hands, I think the people, as much as you wish it'd be different, it almost seems the people that can't see the forest for the trees are the parents in the situation a lot of the time. And the more you can take them out of it and have some sort of, central, that's what I always say. It's just, if your kid's good enough, we'll find out, right? We had a kid, I'm hoping to have him on he's older than me. I shouldn't call him a kid, but TJ Foster, he's a great hockey player. His whole family's, they're incredible hockey players out of Slave Lake. But you could tell by the time the kid's 3 years old that he's something special. Oh, he's not like the rest of these kids, right? It's very obvious. If you can have systems where parents are very sure, it already is like this, which is kind of defeating my own point, but if it's to a point where if your kid's good enough, there's no ifs, ands, or but, he will be found, which I think it already is, but maybe it's just educating parents that way, or just getting it through their heads that is the situation. They wouldn't push so hard and push kids past the point of where they, where it gets detrimental, right? And I think that's just the first step. The more that minor hockey can do, the better. And
and I think, you mentioned this young lad up, from Slave Lake and that. I think whenever a child, a kid, or whoever this might be, or anybody might be, has that talent, a parent, and they have to also know that you have to take your child maybe out of that setting of Slave Lake.
And that's what they did.
And get him into a bigger area, so he's definitely going to be looked at. You take a look at Grand Prairie. How many kids in Grand Prairie have gone to the NHL? And we have a big area here. I don't know what that number is, but it'd be interesting to find out. But then you take Edmonton. How many kids have made it from Edmonton? I come from Barrie, Ontario, and we had 27,000 people. They put close to 27 people in the NHL.
Wow.
And it all depends where you are. The hub, like you're close to Toronto, you've got all these people, all these scouts, you've got all these junior teams that are in that area. They're looking for players, and so you've got to move your kid maybe to a different hub. And you talk about the life skills and that. I think minor hockey will do so much, but if that player makes it to junior, you're not living at home anymore. You're living with other families who have maybe a different perspective of life, and
Yeah.
but they're doing it because they love the game. They raise their kids differently than what you raised your. So that child, when he goes into somebody else's house, living there like I did at 16, you're sort of in awe for the first month, wondering what you should do and not do. But that's your new family now. So your life skills are changing right then and right there in front of you, whether you knew that or not. It is, because they're not your mother and father.
Yeah.
Right? Your mom and dad might come and visit you, come and watch you play, but they're not your parents. And that's when your life skills are actually changing.
For sure. And I think I hear so many important points in there. I'm just trying to catch them all in my brain before I lose any of them. But yeah, that just to start right there, the billet system. I think I've often thought this. I wish you could take the magic that is the billet system with hockey, and I'm sure other sports do it too, but find that in other ways, because you get, like you said, just getting another viewpoint from your parents, even if you have great parents, just getting another viewpoint of, some authority that you don't have a familiar relationship. You learn so much, you develop so much skills, you respect, and I think there's so many positives out of it. I wish there was just some way we could expand that billet system, into school, right? If you're going to university, live with a family, if there's some sort of program there where you could get the added benefits of what that billet program does for kids that are in sports, and move it into some other areas where we could really take advantage of it, because I think it's a great idea, and I think it does bring some things that you might not get any other way. Yeah. And then the other thing I was thinking was when you were kind of telling me a little bit of growing up and playing in Sudbury, and just the how impactful it was to have good coaches and good mentors there that were really taking it. And then you had a lot of, what'd you say, 6 guys went in the first 2 rounds. Yeah. And it's so interesting for me to see now all these new hockey markets, how I never realized how important that high level coach. And it kind of goes back to my theory about, until I started listening to Spittin' Chickens and hearing actual NHL caliber people talk about hockey, you just, it's a whole different game. You're trying your best to learn this game, but you're almost playing a different game. And I find you're seeing it in places like, St. Louis, where all those ex-NHL players, it wasn't a huge hockey hub, but there were some real greats that retired there, and now they've built up that scene. Same with Phoenix, like Shane Doan and all those guys. They're all very heavily involved in the minor hockey, and then you see these incredible people like Austin Matthews start coming out of them, and it's incredible to see that spread. And just, I didn't realize, I always knew, like, it seems stupid to say you don't know how impactful good coaching and good mentoring is, but I figured I always thought I had pretty good coach, but we never had an NHL caliber coach. I didn't realize how much different that is. That's a whole nother level. And like you say, if you want your kid to succeed and you're in a Slave Lake, Alberta, you're going to have to go somewhere like Edmonton where those people are. And I think that's kind of the point I was trying to make, is that if your kid is 15 years old still in Slave Lake and you're pressuring him to, he's running them 20 miles a day to try and get him in shape because he's going to make the show. If he's still in Slave Lake at 15 years old playing bantams here, he's probably not going to make the show. Not doesn't mean he can't be successful and have a good hockey career if you hustle. You see lots of guys that, everyone grows at different rates, but you just have to manage your expectations, and just more of even if you had some sort of set program, so there was less of that and you're not getting these pressures, because then you see these 15-year-old kids that, if he was on the normal trajectory for making the show, he would already have gone and moved away and be playing with some way more talented groups with more people around him. He's already so far behind the gun, and now he's still got that pressure, just ramps up more because he's not where he should be. Now he's behind the 8 ball, and the parents are pressuring him more. It just creates a really tough environment for them. Like you said, if minor hockey could do more with creating some sort of system where it takes the parents out of it, the parents having to pressure them to do it, and made it more so onto the child. But how do you do that, right? It's you can't tell people what to do with their kids. That's their role at the end of the day. I guess all you can show is good examples of the right way to do it, and hope people listen and follow that, I guess.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, you take a look at minor hockey today. I mean, my boys have been done minor hockey. My grandkids, I watch them now. I only got the one grandson who plays here in town. But, I mean, you take a look now what minor hockey's doing, or you've got these teams that are being developed. They call them the elite.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that you have, if you're not going to have a AAA Bantam or a AAA midget team where kids can really get to that next level, and you want to go into this elite thing, I don't understand it all, but also when you're doing an elite team, if that's what they want to call it, the tryouts should be open and fair to all kids.
100%. You shouldn't have to pay a bunch of money to go to some...
and yeah, exactly. Or your kids are pre-picked. If you're going to have an elite team for Bantam, you have a tryout. You do the proper, presentation to the public, say we're having tryouts, this is
Yeah.
what it's about. And then if your kid is picked and your kid cannot play in that team because of financial reasons, then there should be options there for that kid to be there. Whether the team helps find sponsorship so that kid can play. But if you're going to be elite, then you better have 18 of the elite players in the area. Now, whether that comes from Slave Lake, comes from Falher, comes from Grand Prairie, wherever this hub may end, that's what you need to do.
Yeah, and almost something that you need to make that more fair, even that everyone sees. Maybe this is more of a small town problem than it is in the cities, but you almost have to take the people that are going to be scouting or making those tryout decisions for Grand Prairie, for Slave Lake, and shuffle them all up. So the Slave Lake parents and hockey people that have the skills, whoever they pick, a minor hockey needs to go to Grand Prairie needs to go there, because you see so much of this where teams almost picked already just because parents care so much, and there's so much politics that have entered the game. It's so much gotten away from what it should be. It should be a meritocracy, just skill based, and if you're the best 18 players, you're the best 18 players. But there's it's hard to, you almost don't want to try and fix the problem, because that's to admit that you have that problem. And I think a lot of minor hockey programs would rather just pretend they don't have that than actually try and fix it, right? So it just kind of persists as an issue. But you're right, especially on those elite ones, those you can't have. If you want to target something as elite, you shouldn't have that anywhere. It should be a meritocracy. Sports should be a meritocracy. Any way you slice it, there should never be financial or, pulling some strings to get you on teams. That shouldn't happen. But especially at the elite level, and especially if you're going to have to pay some money to get into these academies.
That's right. And I think, they call it elite. Now, I'm not too sure what is that, because Grand Prairie doesn't have, or, there's no AAA, there's no Bantam midget. So this is their way of trying to, showcase the kids out of town, which is a great idea. But back to the, the tryouts, make it fair for everybody. And that, never mind the elite, but that's all the way through minor hockey. Whether you be, it's AA or A, you shouldn't be picked because your dad's the coach.
Even B or C, right? All the way down, all the way down.
You have to, it has to be done fairly. That's how a kid develops. He understands that it was done fairly. And back to your point, I totally agree. When you're doing hockey evaluations, I know it's going to be very tough for people to travel to Slave Lake or Slave Lake to hear, vice versa. People give their time for free when they're evaluating. Now, are they picking the best evaluators, or are they just picking somebody who raises their hand? I think there's enough hockey talent in
Canada for sure.
For Canada, but in Grand Prairie that you could honestly pick up the phone and phone people and ask them to come and evaluate a team and be unbiased.
Right.
But I do appreciate that in minor hockey, people give their time freely.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
Sometimes people,
can't discount that.
You don't want, some people don't want to step up to the plate and coach a team.
Right.
But yet, all of a sudden, here's a team being picked. You got to get this going. And all of a sudden, well, who wants to volunteer? Well, okay, I'll volunteer.
Yeah.
But you're only doing it because you want your kid to play. Not because he's on the team, but you want to support the rest of the kids also.
Right.
So you got to be careful of that too. You don't want to turn people off from
not volunteering their time.
Exactly.
100%. And I got to see that exactly, because my dad always coached my teams, right? He was always in there, and he always dedicated his time, and he was always doing it. And I never made any of the higher team. I was always the second tier, whatever. If there's AA, I was A. If it was, AAA, I was AA. I was always the one. I think my last year of hockey, I played the highest level, but that was the only year I did it, and that was the only year my dad didn't coach. And, you see that in how much time over the years, thousands and thousands of hours that he, volunteered, and to see the payback of how some of the kids, some of the parents, I could tell you there's even some kids that he helped out financially, just being a good guy. And I didn't find this out till I was older, but he always kind of does stuff like that. He's a very humble guy. He doesn't like to talk about it, but a couple kids that couldn't, didn't have the financial, so he paid for them. And then the way they talked to him as their coach, and maybe the kid didn't know, or it was something behind the scenes, but just, the bullshit they take, you're very right. You can't discount the people that are volunteering their time, because you just see these, they're just trying to do it better. And then you didn't play my kids. I'm doing this out of the good of my heart. If you want to do better, operate in there. I implore you, go for it, right? And you're very on the money with that. You definitely can't discount that, because that's the lifeblood of hockey that keeps it moving, is all those volunteers. I mean, that's every sport, but it seems hockey, especially with the travel, with the equipment, with all that, it takes a lot of a lot of juice to make it run, right? A soccer league, you can have one ball and some teams as long as you got shoes. You can kind of make it run. You can organize it with pretty little time, right? A couple people. Hockey does not function like that. You need treasurers. You need, you need all this stuff. You need ice time. There's so much. When you calculate all the equipment and ice time in, there's no sport like hockey that has that kind of requirements, like that I can think of off the top of my head. Maybe lacrosse, but even that, I mean, you don't need ice time for that. You can go out in the field and practice. Like it's crazy to see what a different game it is from all the other ones. But that's what makes it so special, right? There's also no game like hockey in any sense of the word, right? And in terms of excitement, in terms of speed, in terms of competitiveness, power generate, right? Like they tried to do it on one of those sports shows, those sports science shows where they kind of take a UFC fighter and see how hard he punches compared to a boxing fighter. They did, I think, one with a football player hitting and hockey players, and they said you can't compare the speed of two guys coming at each other doing 20 mile an hour. Big bodies, the kind of force that generates when they come, and then there's also boards that come into play, right? Like there's just nothing that hits it on that scale. And obviously I'm biased playing it my whole life, but I love all sports, and nothing's ever gotten me to that point. It's especially playoff hockey. You can't beat playoff hockey, and that's why I was so shattered when it looked like this is finally the year of. As an Oilers fan, my whole life, it was. I had one time where I got to in memory see the Oilers have some success, and it was 2006, and it was the greatest run of my life, being there as a little kid, just watching them go to that. And then a couple years ago, of course, seeing them make it past that first round, that was awesome. And then this is our year. I was so excited. I was so sure the Oilers were winning this cup. I have no idea what made me this sure, but I was so sure of it. And then to see the season get canceled, I was just devastated. Like, no, this is our year. And then when it came back, though, I was so devastated, and I felt that, but I didn't even realize how much I loved watching hockey, and just to throw it on and just to have a little something. And not just hockey, I mean, it was all sports, to lose everything at once, and just no sports to throw on. Holy man, I was bored senseless. Yeah. I was just trying to find stuff to fill my time. You don't realize what a gap that leaves, right?
But when you think of it, though, Nick, I mean, Canada, hockey is the number one sport. Yeah. Everybody in Canada wanted to see hockey back on, back on TV. And back to our conversation prior to coming on air, I agree that they had to play and try to get a cup winner for this year. Yeah. But I also look at the economy and what it's done to the people that are not in that with their jobs, not being in the arena, working and stuff like that. I mean, how do they take this? Yeah. And I understand the NHL, they got TV rights. They're making money now. Players are there was, they had a format that they're following. So we will see a Stanley Cup champion this year, a new one. It'll probably be the New York Islanders, I'm betting. But these things affect, what they're doing today has affected a lot of people. Yeah. Some in a positive way and some in a negative way. Mm-hmm. And I'm just hoping that when the season ends and they get back at it, now they're talking about January, hopefully they can get it back into the rhythm of start in September, be done in May or June. Yeah. So the players have that time to unwind. Yeah. People have time to unwind, and everybody get back into it. But we're in a new world right now with this COVID. I mean, until that's resolved or cured or whatever you want to say, I mean, I think we're going to find a lot of things are going to be a little bit off kilter here for a while. For sure. And I think that's exactly it. That's what, it's, you don't want, just like you don't want to discount the volunteers that are putting their hours in, you don't want to discount by means of the excitement that hockey's back. You don't want to discount all those arena staff around North America that don't have jobs, that aren't getting in there, and all the ECHL players and stuff. Like that was something that I really thought was powerful for Spit and Chicklets to create that ECHL player fund for their podcast, for all these guys that are in the minors that, they're just as much part of the NHL. They're just as much part of the lifeblood of what maybe the AHL is the main one, but the ECHL, those are the guys that need it. And they made that fun and, got volunteers and had a bunch of ECHL guys on the podcast to tell their stories and stuff. And I just thought that was awesome just to see. They didn't have to do it, but they saw a need, right? It's what you wish the teams would do, right? When we were talking about before about Boston trying to get weasel every way they could out of paying their employees at the Garden there. You wish you would see that out of the teams that would do that too, right? It shouldn't just be the players and the ex-players that are, coming together to support their own. You want to see that as well, but you wish, like you say, you could see that from the teams, and that would make, that'd make me and probably you feel a lot better about watching this hockey and enjoying it if we knew all the other people were taken care of as well, right? Yeah. And I mean, I think the players that play down in the, the lower minor teams, like they're not making the big money, but I think those players realize that they're not going to go much higher than where they're at.
Yeah.
So they're playing the game for
the love of it.
Their love of the game.
Yeah.
They're not getting the money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why, because it's a lower caliber league, you know. And you take a look at the CFL this year. I mean, they they canceled the season.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all those guys that are not now. Some of them have to go out and find a job.
Yeah.
So this virus is affecting all sports. And I mean, back to, because we're talking about hockey, you take a look at this virus, what's it going to do to minor hockey?
100%.
You know, where the kids that are developing at a faster rate than some, where does this put them?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be brakes put on a lot of these kids because they're not going to be able to go out and be competitive because they can't go. A team in Grand Prairie, a AA team, can't travel to Edmonton to tournaments maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows what it's all. So this could be a really make it or break it year
for
a lot of kids. And they're going to have to prepare themselves because if they don't have hockey this year, what are they going to do next year? Because you could move up an age bracket next year and you could just say, hey, screw it, I'm not playing, for the simple reason, whatever that reason might be, I've lost interest because of the virus. So that's what people have to really, and minor hockey, everybody has to protect right now.
Yeah, and that was something I was a little bit worried about before. Not that I have any good reason for it, but I think I went back to Slave Lake when I graduated from university, and only for a couple months before I ended up out here. I was maybe back for 8 months before I ended up moving out to Grand Prairie here. But you know, just going back around the rink, I played a year of senior hockey while I was back, right? Senior AA or whatever it was, Slave Lake Winterhawks. Shout out to them. I had a good time there. But in talking to it around the rink, just is that the Bantam AA? Oh, that's just the Bantam. We only have one Bantam. What? One Bantam? Like I think we had 5 when I was in Slave, and not that Slave Lake's any bigger or smaller, but it didn't seem like the kids were playing. They said, yeah, we're really struggling for numbers. Man, I never thought of all the sports. I never thought hockey would be that one, but I think it might be. My guess would be, you know, the screens and the video games are getting a little bit too good. It's just hard. I think that might just be a sports in general. I don't have any. So hockey's my sport to say, but maybe it's just one of those ones, or maybe the ones that are easier to go to. But then you talk about something like that where it takes another year on, because I always found that hockey was one that it had a high, not turnover rate, because that implies people coming in and coming out. But I feel like there's definitely a few moments through my minor hockey career where there's big drops. When checking came in, that was a big drop. Lots of people dropped off or moved to house leagues where there's no checking, right? Yep. That's a big one. You know, just going into midget, right? There was also, even the non-hockey transition years, there was just years of growth where if you were, you know, 5 foot, you know, 120 pounds, and next year 5'1", 122 pounds, and all the other guys shot up to 6'5" and they're 200, and you're getting mucked around by those kind of guys. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that left for that reason, you know, and then the hockey already had a lot of exit lanes. It seemed like for those, like the people that loved it, you couldn't drag them off that highway with a tow truck, right? They're staying on that, but there's those exit lanes are there for the people that aren't as passionate, and just adding more layers and more exit ramps for that. Oh, there's COVID and all that. That scares me a little bit. And I think hockey's too fun of a game for that ever to really impact it, but it's something to think about for sure.
Definitely. And, you know, Nick, you know, you talk about these exit ramps and stuff like that. I think also kids, regardless, you know, we're not in the dressing room when they're in there getting dressed. Kids are talking. But you know what? A lot of kids, they could be intimidated, by the group they're with. There's not that fellowship or that camaraderie with the group. Some kids, their parents can't afford it.
100%.
Some kids are tired of the politics.
Yep, definitely.
You might think they don't understand that, but they
do.
They're out there. They're working their ass off. They can't make the AA team because this guy is coaching and his son made the team, but yet he was you know, how did that evaluation? How come he got picked over me?
For sure.
So they lose interest in it. So there's a lot of reasons the kids, the numbers are down in hockey. Yeah. People, and that is the cost. You go and outfit a kid, you know, I don't know, hell, I couldn't tell you, but when you're paying a couple $100 for a stick.
Yeah, it's expensive.
You know the skates.
God forbid your kid wants to be a goalie.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy Christ.
You know, so there's a lot of cost for a lot of these parents that can't afford it. And you know what? They have to decide what does my kid play? I want my kid to play sports, but why not play soccer when we only need to wear a set of cleats and a
Yep.
pair of shorts? Play something that's not going to be as expensive, but do something.
Yeah.
But I think, it's just difficult times for everybody right now, the way the economy is, and the numbers might be down, but there's a lot more reasons other than, I think there's more reasons. I think there's people are tired of the politics.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest ones, Alex. I didn't say that, but I think you're right on the money with that one, because I remember just my own experience. There was a lot. I can think of a few kids that left for the hitting reason, a few kids just because they were small. But I think the biggest reason was that, exactly, the politics. And I think you're so right to hear, oh, the kids don't understand. We understand. I just, I'm only, I'm 26 now, so I'm, 16 years removed to being a 10-year-old that, you think you don't understand. We hear you guys around the rink. Kids are always, in a small town, at least, maybe this is different in the cities, but the rink is where you are every weekend, every weekday. You're just running around, you're hiding, all the hidey spots. You're hearing the adults talk about it. There's not a chance the kids don't know this, right? And that's got to be an understanding, the way parents talk about and pressure their kids as if, well, I don't say that to them, right? Just when they're talking with the other parents, they're talking with the coaches about the ice time, they know you're doing it. And that feels terrible for a kid to see their parent go to their coach and try and get more ice. That's just the worst feeling. And and that's part of the politics of it. And kids hate that, and they want to turn it off. They want nothing to do with it. They'd rather go play soccer, even if they enjoy it half as much. But if it doesn't, it has, 1% of the politics, they're going to take that choice 9 times out of 10. I think you're right on the money with that being the biggest reason.
Well, your parents, your mom and dad go bitching at the coach. How come my kid's not playing? Well, you don't think that filters from that coach to the coach's kid that's on the team that goes into the dressing room? They look at that kid. He's sort of alienated in the corner. All the other players know he's whining and sniveling.
Yeah.
It's a recipe. It's a recipe for failure.
Yeah, 100% it is. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces, and that's kind of more to that point I was trying to make earlier about I wish minor hockey could do more, but then it goes back to the other point I guess we're making, it takes so much to run a hockey league, and there's so much more you could do, but you're already pushing the limits of what you can ask from volunteers to keep it running. And there's obviously more things you can do, but we're kind of doing the best we can with what we have. But it goes back to the parents. It's not the people that are volunteering their time and doing it, they're not usually the problem ones. It's usually the ones that aren't volunteering their time because they're so focused on their one kid that's going to be, the next Connor McDavid, that they don't have time to volunteer. I'm worried about my kid, right? And that's the ones that are usually the ones talking up. It's usually the ones that see it and watch the kids and are more involved 100%. They see these issues and they know the reasons why some kids are playing more than others, right? And a lot of times, as a parent, you don't know what it is too. Imagine trying to be a coach. And, there's attitude issues. There's a lot more reasons that go into ice time than pure skill. Anybody knows that, right? Anybody that understands hockey knows there's more that goes into it, right? Attitude and the flow of the game and the team you're playing. There's so much things that can go into it. And then just to have a parent come in and tell you what to do, right? Especially when you're volunteering, you don't got no time for that, right? Not a lick of it, right?
Well, that's because, once again, back to your point, I mean, the parents, these parents that are complaining are not the ones giving their time freely. And I mean, to run Grand Prairie minor hockey, whoever the president might be, hats off.
Yeah.
To the volunteers that help out, do all that, hats off to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't believe whether you be the president or whatever you might be in that chain, you're going to change the politics in minor hockey.
Yeah, exactly. And even knowing some of those key positions, right? I just happen to know one of the key ones for Grand Prairie, and the nicest lady and the most, down to earth, and would be able to sit here and have this conversation with us just like one of the guys. And she knows hockey up, down, left, right, and center. And she says the same things. It's all this politics, but what can we do about it, right?
Yeah.
It's just, we're just trying our best to keep the league running.
Right? And then, Nick, I just wanted to add one thing. You made a comment about, you never played on a AA team and all this. And I just want you to know, I didn't either.
Yeah.
I never made a AA team throughout all my minor hockey.
Yeah.
And, so when kids or whoever might be listening, regardless of what level you're playing at, whether it be A or AA, just as long as you're working hard and
enjoying the game, have fun with you're going to have friends for life when you're done. That's the main point.
And I just want one quick little story. When I came to Grand Prairie, and then I wanted to play old timers hockey, Norline Chrysler was the old timers hockey club.
Right.
And so whenever I found out and I made a phone call, they said, well, yeah, you'll have to sort of come out and try out.
For old timers?
Yeah, so I'm
Holy
thinking, holy
shit.
Christ, man. I mean, that's okay. I'm thinking to
Start
myself,
stretching.
Yeah, well, yeah, I stretched all right.
Yeah.
But needless to say, but I understood afterwards because these guys had played minor hockey from a young age all the way up into their 30s and 40s
Right.
and early 50s. And they were a group that didn't want a pile of outsiders in. So whenever
they were trying you out for more than your skill.
it wasn't for skill.
Yeah.
It was, do you fit in with the group?
Right. And that's completely acceptable
And
to
that's
me. Yeah?
acceptable. And once I found that all out and you fit in with the group, everybody had a good ha-ha. It was the best old timers hockey here in Grand Prairie.
Oh,
We
that's
enjoyed
awesome.
it. We played in what the hell, it's Industrial League. We had a good enough team, and I mean, it was really good. But I understand. So if you take that group of Norline players back then, and you take a look at what the kids are, you will develop with that team all the way through minor hockey. As you get into beer league hockey or you get into the Industrial League hockey, you can't replace that. You can't replace it.
And that's exactly, it's an extension of that feeling. That's why it's so hard for these guys that play, when you have those kind of connections, it's hard to walk away from, right? It's the most, and you hear about these guys like, who's buddy in Joe Thornton, that he's just at the rink all the time, right? Even when he's not playing, even when he's injured, he's there with the guys, and they say a guy like that, when he retires, he's going to have to get a job around the league because there's no way you're getting him out of those arenas, right?
Yeah.
It's in your blood almost. And I feel like that's probably with a lot of sports, but for some reason hockey is just it's another level. It's more of a family than any other sport, I feel like, right? Like a football team, it's almost, there's too many people. You can have groups within the football team that are really close, but to get 50 some guys all together on that level, then what you can do with, a group of 15 to 18 men that go to war like you do with hockey, right? And that's the other thing, is the intensity. You don't see that. You don't go to battle, and there's no code like there is in hockey that you can unite under, right? And protect your guys and look out and make sure they're there for the next night. It's so poetic. It's just I feel like even however big the sport of hockey grows, it will never be big enough to truly eclipse what it is as a whole, right? The whole world could watch it, and it's still not enough people for what hockey can be, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you So in '76 when you got drafted, was that when the WHA and the NHL was around? Was there two separate drafts?
There's two separate drafts. I was drafted.
So did you have to pick which one you entered?
You were. So what it was back in '76, what I remember, is that you had the NHL draft, you had a WHA draft. So
okay.
The NHL draft, I was drafted 14th overall. WHA draft, I was drafted 15th overall.
Okay.
And so then whenever that was all said and done, who was going to court you the best?
Right.
And so unfortunately, when I was drafted by Indianapolis, I think they're the Racers. That's the same team that Gretzky was on. They were folding.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy to decide to sign with the NHL.
Yeah. And that was the Islanders, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And so they were the first and foremost. That's where I was going to sign regardless, because WHA was, sort of on their last legs. I mean, so that was just, So there was two separate drafts, and you had that opportunity to either go WHA or NHL.
Right. So then you made that choice to go to the NHL, and then what is that transition like, going to the you played the first? Who's the affiliate team for the Islanders then?
Well, we had the Islanders Farm Club was in Fort Worth, Texas, in the Central Hockey League. So
some nice weather there.
Well, and I think that's what sort of tarnished us a little bit when we were down there. I mean, it's not a hockey climate, and I think the Islanders started to realize that. Was it too late? Maybe. Then we moved after my third year up and down, and then over to Indianapolis, which was a better, you seen some snow, and it was more of a hockey climate.
Yeah.
And I think then the Islanders, the development of the farm club was getting better as we got out of the southern state of Texas and moving up into Indy. So and I don't know exactly where their club is today, like where they that was what we had. I mean.
So I'm just curious, just to think, when you look at these guys that get drafted these days, they've been preparing for that day for the almost their entire life at this point. But I'm very curious for back in the day, what it was like. Did you know, was this all new to you, or were you just kind of go along with the ride of where they tell you to go, or was it all planned out for you, or did your agent help walk you through, or was it, I'm kind of just curious, was it scary? Was it exciting?
Well, I mean, we were done our last year of junior. So at the end of junior, there was I think there was 8 of us. We all saved up a pile of money. And we went down to Florida for 3 weeks.
Nice.
I was conditioning camp on the beach.
Yeah, very important.
Very, very important. Yeah. And our agent, most of us on Sudbury, we all signed with Norm Kaplan and Art Kaminsky. One was in New York, one was in Canada. And they had a player that had a condo, so we went down there for 3 weeks vacation. And then we came back, and naturally the draft happened. It wasn't like the drafts you've seen today. You were drafted, then you were given a phone call. It told you were drafted. Yeah. So then from there, you signed. You go. I went to New York for, I think I was there for probably about 7-8 days. They get you sized up for equipment and skates and sticks and, and then basically, the excitement is getting ready for training camp. Yeah. And then I think, you think as a first round draft pick, you think that, okay, well, maybe it's not going to be as tough a ride as what these guys in the lower rounds. Well, that's not the case. No. Whether you're a first round or you're a 12th round, it doesn't matter.
Especially back in the day where you see nowadays people listening, you might think, oh, but I see people go in at rookies all the time. That used to never happen. I shouldn't say that, but it seemed like that was very rare. You had to be exceptional to come into the league, right? It was very rare for people to come in without at least a couple of years down the minors, right?
Yes, you're 100% right. But take a look at today. We have 32 teams.
Yeah,
right?
True.
Back then there was there
that
was
makes a lot of sense.
A lot of less teams, and so there was a lot more. There was quality players, but only so much quality could go on each team, right?
Right.
And so for us, for New York, I mean, they built their team on first-round draft picks. The Islanders did.
Yeah.
You go through their roster, Dennis Potvin, Billy Harris, all these guys were all
Mike
first.
Bossy
Mike Bossy, Brian Trottier. I mean, was there some failures in there? Of course there was.
Yeah,
one of them was me. I did not make it. No, but I got drafted. I had the opportunity, but there was such a whale of talent there. I mean, you'll get lost in the shuffle.
Of course.
And after they won the first cup, I had a great playing with the Islander organizations. They treated me like gold. You cannot say anything bad about that organization. But, when after they won the cup, and, I had that opportunity to be there, I asked Bill Torrey, do you think I could get asked to be traded and maybe go to a team that, I would have an opportunity.
Better shot to have some opportunity
because
with.
they were so strong. And so that's exactly what Mr. Torrey did. He granted me my wish. They traded me. And I went to Calgary. Now, was that a great move for me? I don't know. I mean, I was just, Calgary was transitioning from Atlanta to Calgary, playing in the corral.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just getting their feet wet in the Canada. So I don't know. It was, there's a lot of excitement.
Yeah,
but yet there's also a lot of downs,
Yeah, of course, and that's a roller coaster. I mean, anybody's entire NHL career is not going to be completely ups, but the guys that aren't the superstars that come in and play 82 games right off the hop, it's a lot different of a road.
Yep.
So that first year when you did go up there, how many games did you play in your first year?
Well, played all the exhibition naturally, and I only got like 4 games maybe in.
Okay.
And then you get a couple every year, because you got to remember, every year that goes by, the chances of you sticking are going to be a little bit tougher, because they've drafted other players. Yeah. Different guys have come from different teams. The WHA was folding. They picked up John Tonelli back then and a few other great players. The 1980, look at the Olympics.
Yeah.
The U.S. hockey team, Kenny Morrow, some players came over through that development, and that's when they won the cup. So, there was a lot of players out there.
Yeah.
And I'm not making excuses for myself.
Of course
but, you also have to be smart enough to see the writing on the wall.
Of course.
And you know what? Bill Torrey, once again, I mean, the Islanders have treated me good, even after I was said, done, and playing. I mean, I went back for the 10-year reunion, the 25-year reunion. They flew myself, my wife the first time. I took my youngest boy from Grand Prairie here the second time out. And, for him to see it, to see what these players do today, what I was doing in mining, that was my path after the game, getting into mining. I mean, I think for my son here, Brad, to see that was to say, like, holy geez, these guys have played all these years. And a lot of these guys that were in this room, you got to understand, have nothing. Back to the Spitting Chicklets. I mean, there's a lot of players that stood in that Islander room that had nothing.
Wow.
They were trying to sell insurance. They were trying to make ends meet, because a lot of them didn't play for big money.
Right.
And then it was interesting in the 2005, we were supposed to have our 25-year, but that was a strike that ended the season. And so we had it the following year, 2006. So we're in the Islander room sitting on the couch having a glass of water. And Mike Boss, he sits down and we're sitting there bullshitting. And he asked me, Big A, what are you doing today? Like, and I explained to him. He said, holy geez, good. He said, good for you. And I'm thinking, why is that? I'm working in a mine, as a supervisor and all that. And he said, I want to just take a look around the room. A lot of these guys don't even come close to what you're doing.
Yeah.
They don't have anything. They're living on their name, what they've done in the past. Sooner or later, the well goes dry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
100%. And you see those guys too, that just by happenstance, I can think of one or two that I've come across in my life that you see that very much living off their name and just telling the stories and all that. And like I said, the first time I met you, me and you had a great conversation. We bullshit for over an hour. Probably should have been working, both of us, but we had a great conversation. And I didn't even, of course we were, whole time. Nothing even wandered, right? But we didn't even talk sports, right? Just had a good conversation. Then, next time, a couple times later, you didn't even mention that you had played in the show. You just saw all my hockey pictures all over my office and asked a question. One thing led to another. But that's it's so cool to see you have so many cool accomplishments, things that you've done throughout your life, but it's not just that. And you have other things to talk about, and you can have a conversation. You don't need to lean on that, but then you have it there, and you can pull out a pretty fucking cool story when you need to, right?
Well, yeah.
Drop some jaws on the floor. And
I was fortunate. Like, I mean, it used to be a rule that you had to play so many games before you got your name in the Stanley Cup.
Right.
Well, that was Bill Torrey and Al Arbor. They put my name in that cup. I didn't ask to go on that Stanley Cup, but my name is there. I didn't ask for a Stanley Cup ring because I didn't play that amount of games. It took me 10 years after the fact, the first 10-year reunion, when Bill Torrey said to me, Alex, did you not get a ring? And the guys found out I didn't get a ring first off, and that must have rang the bell with Bill. And then he come to me and he said, whenever you get back to Canada, which was Grand Prairie, get sized up, you call me, and you will have a ring.
What a good organization, hey?
It was fantastic. They were fantastic.
That's awesome to hear.
And you take a look at that organization where they are today. I mean, look how well they're playing in the playoffs right now.
As soon as they got Trotz, I was like, man, that is going to be a special squad that they're going to put together, man. And the way they can lock down and the way they can play, and it's just an ode to see what Trotz can do as a coach when he had those Capitals, that high flying, and to see how defensively sound he made them, and then to see an actual defensive-minded squad like the Islanders are, and see what a defensive-minded coach can do with that, and when he really wants to lock it down, right? You're trying to teach the great one to, or not the great one, sorry, the grade 8 to, shut down defensively. He'll do it and stuff, but his real gear, he's itching to get up ice, and that's where he wants to go. When you have a team that is bought in 100% from your system, and you're building, this is your team, it's incredible what you can do. And that's another thing I've had a big realization over last couple of years. Maybe this is just getting older and starting to see, the merit of my elders a little bit more clearly, but the impact that the coaches have. I was always kind of one of those saying, the coach is important for sure. But I always thought it was more important about just having a coach that the boys would play for, right? I always kind of had that in my head. If you have a good leader that people will run through a wall for, I always thought that's the number one thing. And, if you have that, the rest of it will kind of find in place. It's just about the talent of the players. Yeah. But man, and maybe that's changing as the years go on and the systems become more particular in that kind of thing. But you can see what a good coach can do to a team. It's just incredible. And I think that it's funny. And I think a big part of that too is hearing, not to bring it up again, but Spittin' Chicklets and hear current NHL players come on and talk about the impact that these coaches have on them, and just, I only played under so-and-so for 2 years, but he changed my whole game around, and he really gave me confidence in that and what they can do. It's so incredible to see what a big impact and how important the coaching role has become.
Well, you take a look at it. I mean, you look at the Islanders in their heyday. They had Al Arbor. He was an ex-NHL player. He knew how to play the game. He understood the game. He understood the league. But more importantly, he understood the players. He understood what it took to be a player.
Yeah.
And he knew how to treat those players, because probably when he was a coach and or a player and he had Scotty Bowman or whoever that coach might have been, maybe there were some things that coach did that Al Arbour didn't like, but he didn't want to treat and that's how he developed. Mm-hmm. How did Greg Berube last year step in as a interim coach and then all of a sudden win the Stanley Cup? Was he a great goal scorer when he played? Absolutely not. He was tough as nails.
Yeah.
But he knew how to treat players as players and players as men, right? You give them a little bit extra leash, you screw up, you do whatever, you break curfew, whatever that might be. Well, then I'm going to rein you back in, but abide by the rules, play the game, and he had success.
Yeah, and you're hearing more and more of the guys that can treat guys like men and really realize that is a big difference. You see these guys that you hear the way the coaches that are trying to teach these grown men like kids and like they're treating a minor hockey. You see the way that the players respond, and sometimes it can work for a little bit, but it never lasts long. It seems like every time, if you can't have that respect man to man as a coach to your team, it's going to fall apart. You might get 1-2 years out of it, but then it's going to go back down that road, and that's going to it shows itself, right? The devil's in the details, and it comes out in your play, right?
Yeah, and that's what the Islanders did have too, Nick. I mean, in the minors, my first year, he was a coach that never played. They must have seen the light, and then all of a sudden, because we were splitting with, other NHL teams. There was half Islanders, half LA. Next year was half Islanders, half Minnesota. So the coaches, so we were fortunate after my second year, we had guys like Billy McMillan, ex-player, played many years in the league. The following year, Billy was still the coach down there. My fourth year down in Indiana, when I was in Indianapolis, we had Bert Marshall. So we had ex-NHLers grooming us for the next step, right? And treating us good. Like, I mean, both Billy and Bert were excellent individuals, and I love playing for them. Al Arbour was a great guy. So those are some of the things you remember. I mean, Calgary, can I say that? Probably not so much.
Yeah.
But even in the minors with Calgary, Tom McPhee. There's a name that's synonymous in hockey. I mean, he was just a real, he was just loved the game. He wanted you to work your ass off all the time, but he treated you as a player. John Brophy was another guy. You'd think the man was absolutely crazy. He was high on drugs or something. But that was just his emotion for the game. Yeah. When a team, we folded in Birmingham, that was Calgary's farm club. Here he is punching a cement pillar because he was so pissed off that the team folded. Yeah. So these are the guys. So you look up to these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, and when they show that kind of emotion, that kind of love of the game, it just makes you want to go out there and play for that guy even more, right?
Exactly.
And that's where the real power's at. And it's so funny how so much of what we talk about and what makes hockey special is so much about the connections between the players and that camaraderie and the coaches, but just that team and just how deep those bonds run and how that comes into all these other players. But it seems like all the real big points are coming. It all comes back to that factor of just how deep the connections in hockey. And I mean, that's sports in general, but I think hockey holds it as a rung above all these other sports. And it's just, when I hear that the numbers are down on minor hockey, it just breaks my heart, because it's like, oh man, just stick with it. You don't know what you're going to get, right? Because it's fun as a kid, but it gets funner with age is the other thing, right? If you can stick past those first couple of years when you start to become, because hockey is a grown man's sport. Or a grown woman's sport. You know what I'm saying? It's an adult sport. To really play the full game how it's intended with all the bells and whistles that come with it, you have to be grown, right? So when you hit that 14, 15, you start to, whether you're man or woman, but you start to, gain real responsibility and understand the responsibilities of the game and the history of the game and what it is. That's when that camaraderie, and it's also, you just get to a certain age where you have fun with the boys, and you always have fun, growing up, but it's a different level when you it's almost for your first however many years to a certain age, you're playing a game, and past a certain, this might come across funny to people that didn't play hockey, but you're going to war. Yep. After a certain age, right? And it's a difference, and not every game is going to war, but there was this flip where you switch, where you were playing meaningful hockey at the end of a season, and everything is on the line, and you're with these guys you grew up, if you're in a small town, I guess, you're with these guys that you grew up with your entire life, and they're out there for you. You're all competing for each other, and just those bonds, you can't get much deeper than that. And that's what people don't realize when you take one of those exit lanes, because of whether it's politics or the hitting or the growth spurts that you're seeing, all those, I feel like there needs to be someone ringing the bell of the it's just so hard to explain, right? How do you tell a guy those things you're going to get out of? But I want to find some way, and hopefully this is the way for, maybe some parents, thinking about whether they're going to pull their kid out of hockey or something, but just let them stick it through, and they're going to come out with so many life skills that are going to serve them the rest of their lives, right?
Yep. And you just mentioned again the exit ramps. I mean, and you take a look at hockey, the route I took, and that was minor hockey, major junior A. Then I'm just sitting here talking. I just had a flash, thinking of Howie Walker. He played some, junior High Prairie up in there, but wherever he played, he finally got down to North Dakota. He played down there for Bob Johnson and that, and Howie still to this day. And the reason why I'm talking about it is you can look at two different parallels. So you can look how most of the hockey players went through and did it like me, minor hockey, junior, pro. And then you take a look at, I'm using Howie because that's the closest I can come right now. There's Howie. He played some junior. Maybe he wasn't good enough to get drafted. Went to university, got his education, played some very good hockey. Yeah. Then he got picked up, went to Washington first, belonged to Calgary. So there's avenues out there. You just can't be closed-minded to think that you have to play minor hockey at its highest level, then go to major junior A to get to the next step in the ladder. Yeah. You don't have to. You can go through the educational way, as we talked about earlier. Yeah. And people have to understand that, So academics has to play a big part in hockey today for everybody. Yeah, it does. And I think that's a great way to look at it. But I think another good thing to say on that point is I think you see a lot of players, I'm trying to think of some good examples that go do 4 years of get a degree and then come in the NHL, and they come in, more grown, more ready to play. Drake Caggiula for the Oilers a couple years back when he came out of university. Look at Cale Makar hopping in last year. I think he played the college final is one day. I think he had 1 day off, signed his entry level, and was playing that Sunday with Calgary in the playoffs, and was not with Calgary, against Calgary for Colorado in the playoffs, and he was amazing. And that's because whenever you take the university college route, you're coming out more mature. Yeah. You're older. You understand what life skills, because you're living at college, you're living in a dorm with you're doing all those things, and I think, I think for the players that have done that, hats off to them. I mean, unfortunately back when I was playing, that avenue wasn't there because education was not at the forefront for me at that time. Do I regret that today? 100%. Right. 100%. But how do you know at that point? And you don't. It takes people to go down those paths, and it takes lots of people to go down that path, because even 1 or 2 people do it. Well, they did it, but those are the exceptions, right? It takes 10, 15. Okay, now 100 players have made the NHL through that road. Oh, now it's an option, right? Now it's in the zeitgeist of what people see as an option. And that's what it takes. And I think that's a very important point to keep that open. Of it, you don't have to follow if you don't follow the traditional path or whatever that is, however you want to cut it. That doesn't mean that's the end of the road for you, right? And everyone develops at the crazy rates. You see, exactly. You hear all these stories of these guys that, like you say, never made the big team, never was on that, and then hit a certain age, 16, 17, and really dedicated themselves. I think that's a lot of the big difference too. Is it's a time when you dedicate yourself to it, and I think that's where I see issue is. That dedication has to come from within. If it comes from without, you're going to run into problems later on. And I feel like that's where I see all these parents motivating their kids and being the motivation for them. If you're the motivation for your kid, they'll never take that next step, because they'll never have to find it within themselves to find where that next gear is, right? If it's always being, your parents are reaching over and pulling on your gear shift, that's not you find the gear. You don't know how to shift it, right? You don't know how to put yourself in that mindset where this is your goal and you are going for it with everything you have within you. That's what it takes to be successful in anything. But I mean, hockey especially, or a pursuit of that high level where you're such a small percentage of the population, it really is expanded. But that means everything, right? If you want to do good at a podcast, you got to dedicate yourself 100%, and it can't be someone else motivating you to do it. It can't be because you want to make money at it. It's got to be because you love it and you want to do it, right? Exactly. Or if you want to do anything in life. And I just think that's where, with this parent issue becoming so huge, it just hurts even these kids that might have found that gear within themselves and might have been a really good hockey player, but they are turned away from it because of the politics and all that, and it just shuts them down. They might never reach the heights that they could have on their own. Yeah, I agree with that. And the other thing about, we always talk about but you got to remember, as when we were younger, and you're in your bantam, and then all of a sudden you're going to midget. There's a lot of other distractions.
Yeah,
it's not
for sure.
It's not family and that.
Yeah.
I mean, girls are coming into your life. There's all these other distractions.
Yeah.
There's your buddies are out partying and they're doing things, and you want to be part of that group.
Yeah.
You can't stop living your life. Just because you want to be a professional hockey player,
Yeah.
You can still have a good life and take care of yourself to get to that next level.
For sure,
But the distractions are there.
Oh, of course.
Never mind.
How did I forget that as an off ramp? Holy man.
That is probably one of the biggest off ramps.
Yeah, I would say so. That's a big 4-laner.
Exactly, and there's a lot, parents should realize that because. Or they wouldn't have had a kid.
Yeah, exactly. So. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh man, how did I forget that one? That's probably the most obvious one.
That is. I mean, for a lot of kids, it is, especially small communities. You may not see it in the bigger hub areas, but I mean, there's definitely distractions.
But I'd say it's even magnified in the smaller centers, because one of the biggest things I found, Alex, was we would travel every weekend. When you're in Slave Lake, you have home games, and then every second weekend you're gone. And if you're not, you're from October to whenever hockey. I don't know, February, March. Anyway, whenever minor hockey ends, whatever skill level you're playing at dictates that. But your weekends are booked. You can't go for a ski trip. You can't do any of this stuff. It is hockey. Correct. And then you double that with distractions. Now those distractions have a bit more pull when you're. Everyone's partying, and the girls are all going to the cabin, and I'd love to come, but I got hockey, That's every hockey player goes through that and stuff. And the trade-off is how much fun you have on those trips makes up for it, right? And the camaraderie and those lessons we learned and kind of the stuff we talked about earlier you can't find that anywhere else. So it's a give and take, but you have to be accurate about that, and you have to be honest about,
what is your commitment?
Exactly. What is your commitment? And not your parents' commitment.
No,
yours.
It's your commitment. Because as soon as you lose your commitment, you're better off going with your buddies.
Yeah, exactly, because you're not going to be happy if someone else is forcing you to be here and lose all your weekends. Now, definitely be sure with the buddies, right? Like, I definitely always wanted to be with my buddies, and I definitely saw that, and man, it was tough. But I loved hockey so much it didn't matter, right? I'm having more fun doing this. But that's because it was my personal choice, and it was never made for me. But now you start making that decision for kids, and now you're putting them into a really tough position that no kid at 14, 13, needs to be put in that position. You're a kid, you should be, just whatever makes you happy, right? Enjoy it from there. Yeah, no, that's definitely a big piece of it. And,
that's the thing. I mean, kids have to be kids. I mean,
yeah,
and you have to enjoy.
You only have so many years of enjoying that with fancy free. Soon enough, you'll have big worry, you'll have a mortgage and shit to worry about. But just enjoy it while you're a kid, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a big part of even university. Even when you're past that, that was always a big thing. Oh, what are you gonna do after? And then you get after. Man, not that I didn't enjoy my university. I had a hell of a fun time when I went to university. Don't get me wrong. But I would have definitely cherished it a bit more if you realize just you'll never feel that feeling of just no responsibility again. You have responsibility of classes and all these things. Of course, those are responsibilities, but it's a different kind of responsibility. There's no real, you fail a class, your parents are going to be mad at you. You wasted some money for sure, but nothing really bad's going to happen. Like if you don't pay your Visa bill and they lock you up or something, right? Like there's a lot more, or you have a kid, or your responsibilities add up. You don't need to add that on when these kids are just trying to enjoy it. Hockey should be adding to their lives, not taking away, right? And at the end of the day, you have to be able to ask that question as a kid or as a parent for your kid. Do I think this is adding to their enjoyment? And if it is, great. You'll never have anything that's going to add enjoyment like hockey is if you are enjoying it. But if you're not, you are really, wasting some precious time that they could be doing something that they'd enjoy more, especially if it's for some living out some goal of a parent that's living vicariously. Those are the worst ones to see, where it's clearly a parent that, thought they were going to make the show and didn't quite, and now they think their kid's going to be the next version of it, and you just see them ride them like...
You're 100% right. And I mean, once again, I can use my son as an example. Both of them, our oldest boy didn't want to play hockey, played it, ended up having a coach that only seen his kid and certain players playing all the time. And he came home, he said, I really don't want to play. Well, that's your call, no problem. Yeah. The other boy here in town, he was playing AAA midget his last year. He wanted to concentrate on school and hang out with his buddies. That's your call.
100%.
You can't push somebody to do something they don't want to do.
Definitely.
And, so everybody makes their choice. Now, down the road, do you regret it? I don't know. I don't think you did, because you made that decision on your own.
Yeah, exactly. And it's your choice.
It's your choice. And I mean, it's no different whenever could I have gone back and played when I was 26? Sure, I could have. But it was my decision.
Yeah.
When do you pull the plug?
Mm-hmm.
Do I keep on trying this till you're 30 and then all of a sudden there is no work out there? Or do you get into the routine of, working?
Yeah.
And that's
and it allows you to make that decision yourself, because I think either having the decision made for you or making that decision definitely dictates how rough of a transition that's going to be into whatever else you transition to from there. Yeah. But that is a big difference. And that, like you say, when these players that, get that choice made by injury, that's one of the classic stories of that is, a guy that thinks he's got another 6-7 good years in him before he even has to start thinking of the slow down, and then, done. And just the mental anguish and the identity crisis that provides to these young kids. Really, you look at these kids, especially if you have done nothing but hockey, that's been your goal, that's been your whole identity for that long, and you're 28. You may be a grown man, but you're a kid at heart, right? You haven't gone out in the real, you've been pretty insulated away from all this, and now you lost your identity, and you're thrown out in the world. That, oh man, you can't help but feel the pain for these guys, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's so amazing to me. I almost feel guilty about it. Going 24 years of my life without realizing there's so much, what these guys go through, and then something like Spit and Chicklets pops up, and now you're so much more aware of these things that these guys have been going through for years and years, and all these different areas. It's so funny how one small change like that can open your eyes to all these different things that you didn't even know were there. And if you did, what could you do to help? But just even having more people understand that, because it probably would help. I would imagine it would help if you're going through that as a player, where you're transitioning away and you don't really know who and what was going on, and nobody else understands it, right? And now something like that, where not everybody understands, it's still quite a nuanced idea. You have to be a pretty big hockey fan to understand it that deeply, to understand what these guys are going through. Yep. But at least some people are, and at least it's starting to be talked about. So it's not this, this taboo thing that nobody can talk about. And now these other players have come out and talked about the struggle they went. Oh, at least it's not just me. I can see a couple stories of guys that have been through this and made it through. And what helped you? What did you have to do? Did you have to go to therapy? Did you have to talk to somebody? Did you have to, go to Tibet and sit with some monks, or whatever it is? Yeah. At least you have some options that you don't have to try everything, but at least, 5-6 guys start coming out. Pretty soon it's 20, pretty soon it's 30, because I bet you at some level or another, everybody that retires from that high level of competition deals with it at least something. It's not going to be crushing for everybody, yep. But and it will be for others, but everyone deals with it to some degree, I think, and that's a big story. Just to understand that and have that be common within the mindset. I think that helps people get through it, at least not feeling like they're alone. It's one thing to go through something, but it's another thing to go through something alone, right?
100%. And I mean, whenever you play at that high level, and then all of a sudden you decide to do, and I only can use myself as the example. Yeah. I mean, when I knew it was my last year of my contract, I talked to my older brother, every once or twice a month. Yeah. So his thoughts on it were like, Alex, maybe listen, if you don't think you're going to go back, maybe you should come out west, and maybe you should work with me, learn something, because you don't have the education, you don't have the skill sets and all that. He was building houses over here in Tumbler Ridge. And, whenever the season ended in Colorado, when I got home, he called me up and he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're going to come out west." So my wife Brenda and I, we talked about it, and we were going to go open up the cottage actually the next day, but I packed my suitcase and we bought a plane ticket, and I came out west, and I never looked back. Wow. And I think, you have to, it was tough on myself, and more so probably than Brenda and that. Yeah, I was out west here, but I think, whenever you root your family from back east, and you come out here and you're starting your life all over again at ground zero. Yeah. To learn a trade or learn about how to work or go to work every day and have that responsibility. I think I owe a lot of that to my brother. I mean, and getting to Tumbler Ridge, meeting certain people, and through hockey, don't get me wrong, being an ex-player definitely paves the way, and I really
it opens some doors, but it doesn't walk you through them.
No, it doesn't, and that's exactly right. It opened some doors for me because you get hired on at the mine, and you start at the bottom and you work your way up, and that's no different if you were to play hockey. You start at the bottom and you work your way up.
100%.
And that's the same at work. Yeah. So I was very fortunate that I listened to my brother, and got sort of schooled that way. Was it easy? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. But I mean, for the betterment of our family, what Brennan and I did, I think was the best thing we ever did.
Oh, well, that's awesome. And it's funny how life works out like that. As long as you're always making decisions and keeping momentum, whatever way that is, whether it's sticking with hockey or as long as you jump into whatever you are doing and try and do it to your fullest and try and be the best you can at it, that's what you're going to find success with whatever you do, right? If you can't, nobody can try 100% and fail, right? And fail continuously. You'll fail, but you'll eventually, if you keep trying, you're gonna find success, right? And you're gonna fail again. But the only time you can actually fail is if you just give up, right? Or if you start giving it a half-ass effort, right? I feel like people think of giving up as stopping completely, but giving up can be, just giving up on 100% and just giving 75, right? That's giving up just as much as going to zero is, right? And if you're not, you say you come out of hockey and you didn't have any of those like work skills that you talk about, but you have a lot of skill. You learned how to start at the bottom and work your way up in hockey. But that drive to just work hard and do that, it'll take you farther than any specific skill will, right? That's what allows you to acquire specific skills and whatever it is. It's about that drive, and I feel like that's something that's lost in the world a little bit more. We concentrate so much on accumulating very specific skills, but not about the drive to use those skills and how to develop them, quickly and transition to whatever it is and be able to jump into something, give it 100%. No, it doesn't take you 10 years to learn it. You can master it in a couple because you have that skill of giving it 110, right? And a lot of people just don't have that. People don't know what 110 is. They're capped at 75. That's the most they've ever given their life to anything. So they don't even, there's 25% or maybe even more that they don't even know is inside of them, right? And it doesn't matter what they're doing. They're limited the entire time. And that's what I think is so cool about getting people into high level hockey. It's just it's an easy way to let you push yourself to some limits and just find out what your limits are, right? And it doesn't have to be hockey. It could be anything. Just pursuing anything passionately will show you that in yourself so that you can bring it to other areas of your life and start bringing that through and letting that shine through, letting that open some doors for you, right? Because that'll open doors just like an NHL name will, right?
100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree.
So my big question I got to ask, I was just quickly before I hopped on, I had to hop on Hockey DB and check out the stats. And I noticed that when you got called up and played in the playoffs, did you get your first NHL goal in the playoffs?
Record, NHL goal, would be in the playoffs.
How fucking cool was that?
Well, actually, it was whenever I got called up, it was cool just to get called up.
Yeah, or I guess maybe before we get there, can you tell me the story of the first time you got called up?
Well, to the playoffs?
Sure, yeah.
Well, the playoffs were probably be my most significant call-up.
For sure.
That was just, we were down in Tulsa with, we beat out the Tulsa team. That was the Vancouver Farm Club.
Yeah.
And we were actually having a little get-together where we were staying in Tulsa. And Jimmy Devellano, who was our general manager of the Indianapolis team,
right,
who is now the head guy for the Detroit Red Wings in that fold. But Jimmy tapped me on the shoulder and said, well, you might as well hit the fart sack because you got a road trip to make tomorrow. You're going up to LA. So basically you arrive in LA with what you had on. Yeah. No money in your blue jeans. And so that was the way it was. And, I talk about the class of the New York Islanders. So you get called up. We played a game. We beat them. I got 2 goals. I got an assist.
Holy shit.
I was in, as high as you could possibly be.
I'd say.
And then, the next day, you're wondering, okay, well, we're going to board the plane. Are you going back to Indianapolis to continue? Or are you going to New York? And Bill Torrey pulled me aside, said, you're coming back with us to New York. Yeah. Went back to New York. And I said, Bill, I'm going to have to get the wife to send me some stuff, da-da-da. So by the time we got back to New York and we got back to Long Island, where I was going to stay, there was a car waiting for him. Bill Torrey handed me $500. He says, go get yourself some clothes and that, whatever you need.
Wow.
And he never asked for anything ever back. And
what a guy.
Yeah. And then, through the course of the playoffs, which I did go back to Indy and play one game, and we got beat out by the Colorado Farm Club that were in Fort Worth at the time. Being in Long Island, he flew my wife from Barrie to a game in Long Island so she could see what it was all about.
Cool.
So that's, that was my biggest highlight of my NHL career. And then
that's awesome.
I got 39 games in with Calgary, but those were the highlights. Getting 4 points in Stanley Cup playoffs.
Holy shit.
Seeing that live.
You got 2 goals in your first playoff game?
Yes.
And that was your first NHL. So you got your first 2 NHL. Holy shit.
Yeah. So
holy
you
man,
can tell
that's
my career wasn't that stellar.
Hey, look, that's cool. And that's more than any goals I got in the NHL.
Well, I tell you what, a lot of players, a lot of guys all their life never get to do what I did. So I got to do it, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
Do I sit and boast about it? Absolutely not. I don't have 1,000 games in the NHL, but I mean, I do have what I have, and
and it's something to be proud of, right?
I am proud of it.
And it's and I think even more, almost to me, and I can't tell somebody what to be more proud of, but to me, I think almost what makes it even more significant is that you have something like that is a cool achievement, but then you've also you didn't sit on that, and you've achieved in the rest of your life, past hockey career, you've achieved awesome things on your own. And I think that's you don't see that with many players that can do both. It's usually the success by one is gated by the other. Maybe not in such a sense, but it's hard for guys to have that kind of success and just roll right into something else and be happy. I guess that's where I'm looking at. Maybe not less in terms of success, but just enjoying life and being able to jump into something else and not hold anything back. From the sounds of it, I mean, I'd have to sit here for a few more hours to get down to that level to see if that is true. But you seem like a pretty happy guy and that you're really enjoying life, and I feel like that is something that it's when you reach those kind of highs, it's hard to enjoy the rest of life, and I feel like that is a skill in itself and something to be proud of, to be able to have that kind of fortitude, to be able to go on and whatever it is, whether it's working in a mine, whether it's working in Grand Prairie, building, whatever it is, just to enjoy it and to be able to still keep that happiness and not just, wonder, oh, well, what if I did this? And, it's very easy to slip into that game and that kind of rut that you see a lot of people do. And I think that's almost what's more impressive to me than the goals. Obviously not more impressive than the goals because I'm pretty impressed by that, but almost.
Yeah, okay. No, I think you got to understand that, life, you have to live life. And if you're not going to live life, then you're going to shut down. So, I mean, getting on with your life is the big thing. And then, if it wasn't for mining, we would have nothing. I mean, I'm so fortunate that I got in at Quintet. There was a lot of young guys getting in there, like learning the mining ropes, and then getting up to Suncor for the last 17 years, being treated the way you're treated up at Suncor. Excellent company to work for. Little plug there. But bottom line is, I mean, that's what's given me what I've got today. And then so my wife and I worked very hard after the game to get to where we are. And we're reaping some of the benefits today. And we
can't skip by that, right? The women behind us are definitely what help us get to those heights, right? We'd never get there without those special women in our lives that help make it
distractions.
all happen. Distractions.
Right?
Exactly, distractions. Oh fuck, that's great. But no, it's funny. Seeing that, and I think maybe it's more of an impact seeing the ability. I feel like it's more impressive to me maybe than you, just the generation difference of seeing that, because I feel like the older generations, that was more input. You were going to enjoy life and you're going to move on. It wasn't a lot. Feel like the younger generations, we see less of that, and it's more of a hard. I don't know what would cause that or what what things are, but I feel like nowadays it's very easy where maybe that doesn't seem that impressive. Oh, I moved on, you got to enjoy life. But I feel like that's a big realization for a lot of people that are more closer to my age, of people just, if they don't accomplish something, they just, like I said, put it to 75 and don't ever pursue something again if they can't get back to there. And I think that's what's so impressive, just, enjoy and be there. And I think maybe, I don't know what it is, but we have to get back to try and get in that more ingrained in the younger generations too. That is important.
It's responsibility.
It is. I mean, it is.
I was 26. We had 2 kids.
Yeah.
You have to put food on the table. You have to do the things that you have to raise a family. I mean, your mother and father did it. My mother and father did it. And my mom raised 8 of us.
You're so right.
And my dad did the work, and my mom did the work at home. And so when we were done and, you come back into the real world, it's responsibility. You have a responsibility to move on with life.
For sure.
And do I sit there and live in my hockey past? Well, absolutely not, because it wasn't that great of a past. Right. It was something that I loved to do, and I got some accolades. And I got some accolades out of it. I got some awards out of it, and but you still have to live life. You have to get down in the trenches and start somewhere. My dad always used to say, he said, you got to crawl before you walk.
100%. Man, I feel like I almost just had an epiphany there. You're so right. It's responsibility. That's big. I feel like I've been struggling with that. I've seen that, but I didn't know what would the reason be. But I think you're right. It's responsibility. And I think major responsibility has been it used to be, well, this is just my theory, of course, because I'm just pulling this all out of my ass, but let me see if any of this rings true with you. So I feel like it used to be back in the day where responsibility was forced onto you at a younger age. That was just kind of the way things were. You had to kind of grow up a lot sooner. And I feel like things are more insulated. Things have gotten better, right? Just like we said, 10 years ago, NHL players are so much more prepared coming in the league than that. But that's just life. Everything gets better, well, not better, but things progress and there's certain things and things get easier and you're not forced to take on, if you don't want to take on responsibility, you can, not really take on any responsibility until you're 35, 34, right? You might not have a kid or something. That might be your first responsibility and it might be at 36 years old. Whereas if you were doing nothing, if you had no real responsibilities by the time you're 30 back in the day, people would look at you funny, right? It wasn't acceptable not to have responsibility. But now you see the results of, in doing a good thing and trying to make people's lives enjoyable and easier by, making it so they're not required to take on responsibility has definitely made it so our ability to handle responsibility diminishes, right? And I think it may be just a function of getting that later, because when you start taking on real responsibility, closer to 18, 20, 22, you have more years to learn, right? When you're only taking on real responsibility at 30 years old, by the time you're 40, you've only had a decade out, where back in the day, you'd already have a couple decades under your belt, right? You're just kind of getting your feet under you when guys have already, kind of starting to get it figured out a little bit. And I think that's a huge piece of it that I was missing. I thank you for that. I like coming out. I hate having an idea in my head and I can't think of the reason why. And I love coming to that. That's awesome.
You go back to, when I was leaving home at 16 to go play hockey. You have a responsibility to yourself to take care of yourself when you leave home. You have a responsibility to represent your family and keep your nose clean and do whatever. But you also, you have that responsibility I had a responsibility to the Sudbury Wolves.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have taken me under their wing, taken me out of my home, put me in, so those you're learning a responsibility right there as soon as you leave home. And, I think for a lot of kids today, like a lot of kids don't leave home when they're 16.
Yeah.
Some don't leave home till they're 30.
Yeah, definitely.
So you don't learn that responsibility. And, I don't know how you teach somebody responsibility. I think it's something that you grow into.
It's got to come from within. Again, you can't have anybody forcing on, it's about, and maybe more so it's about taking on responsibility that you want to, right? All those things that you just talked about were all choices, right? Having a kid, it's a choice. Well, it's not always a choice to have a kid, I suppose, but things like that are choices where there's so much of even responsibility that's forced on, right? When, parents force somebody to go to school, they're not learning. I think it's just forced responsibility. It's not responsibility that they wanted to take on. I think that's another big piece of it, that it's got to be something that you decide to take on and that you're willing to do it, and it's something that you want. And finding responsibilities that you want is a tough go when your life's been so easy. When you don't have any small responsibility that you grow up with, it just becomes a bigger and bigger elephant in the corner of, holy shit, when I do have to jump on, I don't want to take on a big responsibility, right? And you're so scared of it when you grow up with responsibility from a young age, right? Like, that's why I think it's so valuable to have a job at 12, 13 years old, because you learn some responsibility early, and then it's not so scary when it comes later, right? Like, when I was in university, I was in business school, and it was so clear, the people that had worked the majority of lives and the people that hadn't, it was like night and day. You could see it. And it was like, holy man, I can't imagine. Just now you're 18, you go to school for 4 years, you're 22, right? Maybe it takes a little bit of time, you travel, you're 23 years old. Now you're going in for your first job and you're trying to interview. You like, man, I don't know how that's going to work out, but from how they acted in the classroom and how they talked to the professors and stuff, I couldn't believe how some of them would talk to the professors. It was, man, if I talk like this to any of them, I'd get a cuff on the back of the head from my parents. Or you grow up in a small town like Slave Lake, you might get a cuff on your head from about 60 different parents that have they know you and they know you grew up, and that's not you. So you're getting cuffed from everybody around, right? And that's what's so beautiful about growing up in a small town. You have that community to do that, but you just see these kids that very clearly have never had that. And I just question what that's going to, I almost wish I could, find what they're doing now and just ask them how their first couple of years went, because I guarantee you that was a rude awakening when they finally got where they needed to be, and really trying to talk like that to someone like your boss, like, I don't know how that's going to end up. Oh man.
But you're, the responsibility part of it. I mean, what are they going to learn? What do you take out of the sport of hockey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, through minor hockey and that, the responsibility is, when you're playing, I guess, would be the responsibility to be true to your teammates. I mean, that's where responsibility starts. I mean,
and that's the biggest piece of hockey is that all the unwritten rules, all the stuff that goes into hockey that we're talking about, what makes it so special, all of that is centered around being true to your teammates and being there for them, right? And even in the interviews, kind of what I was talking about, where you don't get some of that personality, because everything about hockey is to take away the individualism and put you towards the team, right? Take all of the individual accolades and put them on the team, right? You can see it 1 year. I think it was Chicago won the Stanley Cup, and Cleveland won the Larry O'Brien Trophy. And you could take LeBron James, and I think it was Jonathan Taves, their speech, just with their first media speech, when they're talking about just and how different it was between like the team and the guys and the goalie and just everything. He didn't say I once in that speech, and then you listen to the, I was really, I knew I could take it to this level, and it's a different, and it's not bad or good. I think you need that. If some sports need that, and I think basketball is one of those things where to be successful at the sport, you need that individualism, and you need someone to just put the team on the back and kind of take it like that. But if you try and do that in hockey, you actually do a detriment to your team. If one person tries to do too much, things go off the rails just as much as if people aren't trying to do enough. And that's such a cool balance to see that you have to, you could be Connor McDavid. You look at him, he's the perfect example. He's the best player, and you can see that he's frustrated out there because no matter how much more talent he has than the next guy in the NHL, if you don't have the team dynamic as a whole, you got nothing. Yep. At the end of the day, you're sitting at home, you might win the Art Ross, but that's not what they're after, right? And you can hear the way the guys talk about it. And I think maybe after a career, you look back and you're still pretty happy about the Art Rosses and that. But if it's not the Stanley Cup, that's what people are after. And I think that's what makes it so special. And that's what's so beautiful. And those are the important lessons that we need to be teaching the kids, instead of, it's skill and you got to make the show and it's all about money and you can be a millionaire, one of these or you'll be famous. It's not about that. It's about those skills you learn and how to be true to your teammates, be true to yourself, be true to the spirit of the game, and that teaches you those values. Like you say, when a guy comes out of it, if you play hockey the right way with the right kind of coaches that instill the right values in it, it doesn't matter what you do after hockey. If you're willing to put in that same effort you were to hockey, you're going to be successful at whatever you do, because you've learned those values and you've learned how to speak to people and communicate and all those skills, right?
You don't hear the arrogance from hockey players in the NHL that you do in other professional sports.
For sure.
Because it is a team sport.
Yeah.
And that's
it is.
In closing, that'd be the most important thing. There's no arrogance. You don't hear Connor McDavid only talking about himself.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't hear any of that stuff.
Oh.
So, I don't find that there's arrogance whenever these players are being interviewed. Mm-hmm. You don't see that. You see other sports, yes, but not hockey.
Yeah, and if you do see a bit of arrogance, it's jumped on right away, and people, are quick to point it out and to, correct it. And that's just what's so beautiful about it. And I think you're right. That's the best way to end it. I can't thank you enough for coming on, Alex. It's almost 7:30 there. I hope it didn't take too long. I appreciate you coming out, because I had a ton of time. I learned so much, and I can't wait. I'm sure we'll have to do it again here in the next couple of months. So I'll get you back on here. Maybe have dinner for you one night.
Yeah, Nick, I want to thank you for that craft dinner and that warm beer.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate you having me on. And, I don't want people who listen to it to think that we're bashing minor hockey.
No, of course not.
And all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But, I mean, minor hockey, has done great things for a lot of people.
Yes, it has.
And, hats off to all the volunteers and that. But if we could control the politics and go back to what you're saying, have people that come in from different areas and do an unbiased evaluation of hockey clubs or teams, how they're being picked, I think you'd see a better hockey system.
I couldn't agree more, and that's a beautiful way to end it. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Awesome. All right. That was episode 18. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in the whole time. Couldn't do this without you guys. You guys are the whole reason that this is even possible. Thanks for listening. I can't appreciate you guys giving me your time out of your busy days. Just like I can't thank Alex enough. I hope you guys really enjoyed that podcast. He is just the best kind of guy. Anything you needed, he'd be there for it. Never says no. Just always thinking about other people, and so much knowledge and so many good effing stories, guys. I'm telling you, like before and after this podcast, you think the stories on there were good? He was telling some real good ones before and after, and just I know he'll be on here again, and hopefully, he hears a little bit of positive feedback from this and makes it worth his while. And I hope he had a good time on here. And just if you guys could follow my social media pages for the VonDubCast and keep listening to this, maybe tell a friend if you hear a podcast like this and you know there's a big hockey fan in your life, or whatever the podcast topic, if you hear it, if it resonates with you and you think you know somebody that might like it, just pass it on. Word of mouth is the biggest way that these things spread. It's tough for a person to take a gamble on 2 or 3 hours of their day if it's not coming from someone they trust. So if you're that person, that's all I can ask of you guys. If it does resonate with you and you think someone will enjoy it, pass it along. That goes a really long way for me. So thank you guys once again. Thank you, Alex, and see you on Monday.